to talk about universities, because we talk about what's happening inside universities, the idea of safety and the idea of whether the institutions are set up properly. You've talked about how you think these institutions have been effectively taken over to some degree by political activists. You recently made the case that political activism as a university should not be something the universities are involved in. But I want to read you something. You said, some may argue I'm constraining the role of the university by suggesting this. They would suggest that even if teaching and idea generation are its primary functions, the university can still be a force for social justice advocacy that holds societies to account. I find this a dangerous view. Why do you find it a dangerous view?
For 3 reasons, maybe 4. First, universities have to have a deal with the broader society. If universities' position is that we're just going to think our thoughts, you got to let us think any crazy, controversial thought because you never know what's going to turn out to be true and important, and you got to leave us alone, then we got to leave you alone. We don't get to say, Harvard thinks you need to have this policy, Harvard thinks you need to have that policy, Harvard won't let you do this. Or you can say, we're going to pressure you, but if we're going to pressure the broader society, we kind of got to figure that they're going to pressure us. So I just think it's an unreasonable self-concept that only a professor could have, to think that we were allowed to pressure them and they weren't allowed to pressure us. Second, I think it's the right thing for all of us, and it gets more true every year, that strategy should be about building on what you're good at rather than kind of replicating what you're not so good at. There are a lot of people who can take any known position on the Middle East peace process or any known position on what legislation Congress should pass tomorrow about Medicaid. But the only place in our society can think about what's the healthcare system going to be like, and how are we going to finance healthcare and deliver and disseminate healthcare when there are 30 versions of Wegovy for virtually every condition, and the proper provision of them is most. Who else can think about that but universities? Who else can think about what democracy is going to kind of be all about when the patterns and networks of communication are profoundly different than what they are right now? We should do, it is enough to provide the intellectual frameworks for all the people who are going to lead society, and to be a major source of ideas and concepts going forward on everything from gender roles to radioactivity. We should do that and not try to argue about this is more socially just than the other thing. And the third thing is that being brilliant is different from being wise. And we shouldn't assume that because universities are very successful in concentrating among their faculty the people who are really staggeringly brilliant, that doesn't mean that they're going to be wise about the complexity of problems. I mean, I've done this lately because less because of my interest in universities than because of my interest in AI. I've read a lot about the development of things nuclear with the Manhattan Project and in the aftermath. And some of the most brilliant physicists had some of the most completely goofy ideas for how nuclear energy should be regulated. We should make it public for everybody so everybody could understand it, so everybody could share it. That was their idea. That wasn't a very good idea. So I think this idea that universities should try to become platonic sources of leading pressure is kind of crazy. And then I look at the dialogues that take place on many of these campuses. I see things like the virulent anti-Semitism professed by people who are really eminent scholars, and I don't agree with the Bill Ackman world that tends to think that because they've said some offensively anti-Semitic things, they shouldn't get to be great scholars. But I sure think the university should make clear that it is an institution, doesn't approve of what they're saying.
But how do you think
and
that
it
happens?
certainly doesn't, and it certainly isn't going to allow them to speak for it. And I think there's been an abdication of responsibility pretty universally
When do you think
on
that
the
happens?
part of university trustees to meet this responsibility. And I think ultimately they are the ultimate fiduciaries of these institutions. And I think for the most part, they have failed. One of America's great universities just appointed a new president who, in an opening statement, said something about how we should all be the change we want to see to bring about a better world. And I thought it was a fundamental misapprehension of the purpose of a great university.